Our next presenters are going to be Lieutenant John Flannigan of the Vermont State Police and Sergeant Jim Roy of the Colchester Police Department. And they're going to give you the history of the DRE program in Vermont, how it got started, where it's moving, and what it means to the people of Vermont, and how we can better utilize that in combating drug driving in Vermont. Lieutenant, Sergeant.
Good afternoon. So I'm keeping you between lunch right now. Jim Roy and I are sorry. So the real story about how the program started here, it actually was 2004, and a couple Irish guys at St. Paddy's Day in Phoenix, Arizona. It wasn't me, by the name of Minal. Where is he? And O'Leary, Bill O'Leary, retired lieutenant from VSP and now works for NHTSA. So I don't know how you got anything done on St. Paddy's Day. I bet. I know you better than that. But that's really where things started for here. I'm going to give you a little bit of, we're going to kind of skim the surface about the history and development of the program, both nationally and here in Vermont. But 2004, these conversations started. We were a little late to the game. The program really started years before that. A lot of states started coming in the early 90s. But the program itself starts back into the late 70s and early 80s. This really isn't new. We were the 43rd state to adopt and the program through IACP. But back in the 70s and early 80s, really was the streets of LAPD. You had Dick Studdard and Len Leeds were working for LAPD, and they were starting to see a lot of substance abuse on the streets that they patrolled. Things like cocaine were really coming at the forefront, and PCP, if you remember that. So these things were starting to spill out on their highways, and they were starting to see the injury crashes, the fatalities within their jurisdiction, and they decided that they needed to do something about it. So just down the road from them was someone named Dr. Marcy Burns from the Southern California Research Institute, really developed standardized field sobriety tests. So they had a partner there right from the get-go and tried to develop this program. It certainly wasn't easy. It's still developing today. I think there's a manual that comes out every 2 to 4 years. It all depends. We certainly couldn't do it without ICP and the support that NHTSA provides. So we're here, rewind, or fast forward, 2004, 2005. Vermont trained its first DRE officers. It was 5. And we were seeing these cases. And how many veteran officers are here? There's quite a few. That you had experience on the road, and just raise your hand, where you had someone you suspected who was impaired by something other than alcohol or in addition to alcohol, but just didn't have the training to take that extra step. Okay? We were there as well. The problem is that we still see that today, unfortunately. We've gotten a whole lot better at detecting and recognizing impairment of substances other than alcohol. But we shouldn't have that problem at all. We really need to fill in that gap. And we'll talk about some programs that are designed to help us just do that. So how many today is the DRE concept is new to you that you haven't heard of before? Anyone? So it's been around for a while here for 9 years. So basically in terms, this is what it is. They have more training than the average officer. Most of our officers here in Vermont go through standardized field sobriety testing, which now is a 40-hour class that the academy offers. Usually you take that right after your basic training. So, and their expertise is detecting and recognizing impairment of other substances or in addition to alcohol. So, and they're good at what they do, but we need more out there. And this is why we do it. We do want to prevent crashes, especially those injuries and fatalities on our highways. We all can personalize that we know of someone or have personally been involved, that this has affected lives. It's affecting too many lives. And us as DREs, we're passionate about getting these folks off our highways, hopefully before they crash, and then getting them the help that they need. So, Greg, you talked about 28 DREs. Well, as of this weekend, we're now up to 35 because we just had 8 that we've added that have just concluded their last phase of training. They'll get an orientation here in the next couple weeks, and they'll be out on the streets helping in our enforcement efforts to do those enforcement evaluations. So just kind of, this is a glimpse of where we are at with our DREs and what resources we have regionally and locally. So 15 VSP troopers that we have that are scattered throughout the state. And then we have 17 local departments that currently have at least one DRE. Colchester PD now has 3 that we'll be able to utilize. And we just trained 2 Department of Motor Vehicle inspectors that just went through this last class, as well as we have one from DLC as well. So great asset that's available to every officer here. This just gives you an idea of the locations of where they are throughout the state. And I know the first thought is, wow, we certainly have a lot of DREs in the Burlington area. Well, Chittenden County is close to Vermont. And 42% in 2013, 42% of all of our enforcement evaluations came from either Franklin or Chittenden County. We still do have some gaps throughout the state that we need to fill. The last thing that I want to hear as a field coordinator is, and I get the phone calls on occasion, where someone's looking, they have a suspected drug-impaired driver, and they can't find a DRE to come and assist them with their investigation. So it doesn't happen often. It certainly happens a lot less than it did when we first started the program with, of 5 that we were trying to get around the state. So we're still looking for qualified applicants. We'll have an open process here probably. We'll be recruiting new DREs probably sometime summer or fall this year and trying to put them through another class. So if you have interest in that, or you have officers that have an interest in that, we highly recommend that they go through that as well as the A-RIDE training previously. So in 2006, ICP accepted our program. We became the 43rd state to have a full-time DRE program that we utilize those resources to support our efforts in drug-impaired driving. As mentioned by Greg earlier, that we've had several favorable county decisions about the DRE program, that the DRE testing, if properly performed, is based upon reliable methods and principles. Again, this is all about science. We're not making this stuff up. The part of the DREs is what we do is, and we have to be, because of what we do, is that everything is based, it's systematic and standardized. So we're all doing the same thing, just as we should be doing with our SFSTs out there, that you go anywhere around the country, law enforcement is doing the same thing. And they're sticking to that. It's real important. So we've had about over 600 evaluations. I think we're close to about 700 now that we've done. We're increasing our business each year. And I don't know whether we're seeing more drug-impaired drivers or we're just getting better at detecting it. I really think it's a combination of both. We couldn't have this program without the support of Governor's Highway Safety and certainly NHTSA. Even those small departments that are working with small budgets to be able to put their officers through training. There's tremendous training, as Greg outlined before, and Jim will go into a little bit here in a few minutes. They couldn't do that without some support for training. We have an oversight committee, and we have a lot of representatives on that. Really a steering committee for the program. Of course, Highway Safety is there. Law enforcement DREs are represented. We have the Department of Health, Dr. John Searles, who you'll hear from after lunch as well, and Dr. Tricia Conti from the Forensic Lab. We have the Vermont Criminal Justice Training Council also on that. So we're looking at issues and addressing and trying to further the program as much as we can. Again, we're operating statewide. There's really no area where we can't go to other than issues as far as travel time and getting DREs out to a particular call. And they're on an on-call basis. So we still have some issues to work through that. When you call any of our dispatch centers, especially the PSAPs, they should be able to get on the phone, call somebody immediately, find them, and get them to come out on a call-out basis if there's no one that's on duty. And that's accessible through the Vibers website, where you have a list of our DREs, as well as Spillman in the special skills table. Again, DREs can be requested by any law enforcement agency. You usually get a DRE on the phone if you don't have one close to the scene, and they're going to ask you some questions. Why you believe this person's impaired. Have you put them through standardized field sobriety tests? What other evidence was observed? It's just a few questions that we need to ask before we make the decision to come out and in some cases travel a couple hours. And this is really important, and I know you've heard before, Advanced Roadside Impaired Driving Enforcement, ARIDE. This really is the program that's going to bridge the gap between basic SFST training and the DRE program. And this is where we're getting those referrals for those officers, that you're giving them a few more tools in their toolbox to recognize impairment that's other than alcohol. My agency, we're making the commitment that everyone in our field force uniform, we're going to get them to the ARIDE training over the next couple of years. We already have probably about 30% of our troopers trained in this, and we're looking to get 100%. It's that important to us. Here's a breakdown of what we're seeing in toxicology tests with our DRE enforcement evals, where we have blood that's been taken. And you'll see that really the number one substance or category is CNS depressants, which is a large category with a lot of subcategories. Mostly antidepressants, anti-anxiety, sleep aids, all the benzodiazepines that you see out there. It's a huge classification of drugs. Many are legitimately prescribed. And we talk about the problem with opiates, but there is a lot of abuse in this drug class as well. So that is our number one drug that we're seeing in toxicology that's coming back, followed by cannabis, and then narcotic analgesics are opiates or synthetic opiates out there. Now, about 55% of all of our cases are polydrug. So we're seeing 2 or more drug categories. Some cases we've seen up to 4 or 5 drug categories at once, believe it or not. But commonly in our polydrug, we do see a combination of the depressants, cannabis, and narcotic analgesics. And we have seen some other categories as well, significantly insignificant, dissociative anesthetics, things like PCP, ketamine, hallucinogens, and we do still see a number of stimulants. And I think we've seen more of those in the last couple of years as well. And here's a total evaluations with toxicology that's available. We're getting very few refusals with these cases, and I do credit some of the work that the DREs are doing, the way that they build rapport with these individuals and certainly treat them very respectfully, because a lot of these folks do have a substance abuse problem. They recognize that, and they do want to get help. And we do get very few refusals. And we certainly can't compel a sample unless we've got a crash that's got serious bodily injury or death. So, but some of these are rule-outs as well. A DRE will rule out where there's no impairment at the time they do the evaluation, which doesn't mean that there was any impairment at the time of operation. And then there's also medical conditions that are recognized. Very few that we have that where samples are not obtained or submitted early in the program. We had some issues with that, but we rarely see that. And I'll turn this over to Jim Roy at this point.
There's no way I can talk as fast as John just did, but I'll do my best. I know everybody wants to get to lunch. First and foremost, thanks to everybody for being here and recognizing and trying to help Vermont with this really real problem. John already recognized Ted and Billy O'Leary for all their contributions in getting us started, and we certainly wouldn't be here without them. But the other important players in this are folks like Colonel Lesperance, all the chiefs, and all the sheriffs. We've talked a lot about DREs and how important they are, but we haven't talked a lot about how they become DREs and the level of commitment that they put into to the program themselves. And it has to come with support from their agency heads, so thank you to them. The other people I want to recognize here, and I know Greg had them raise their hands, but I'd like them all to stand up, and those are the DREs that are in the room. Can you stand up, please? And to add to that, we have Greg DeGurney and Dr. Trish Conti from the Health Lab. You guys can stand up. They just audited the complete DRE school in an effort to help us. I think every rank and file officer in Vermont serves because they want to do just that. They want to serve their community. They want to serve their state. What I can tell you is that the DRE officers have a desire that goes way beyond that. To submit yourself to the grueling training that they go through, and then the scrutiny thereafter, and kind of the maintenance of that training is a real testament to their willingness to serve. So thanks, guys. So how do you get to be a DRE? We start off with a grueling selection process. You make it through that selection process, you get the opportunity to go to school. When you show up on day one, which is phase one of the 2-day school, you're tested as soon as you get in there. Try to get an idea of your base level of knowledge. From there, you go through different learning objectives, and we'll talk about that in a minute, and you have to test to get out of there. You have to do a proficiency test on top of a written examination to be able to get out of day 2, just to get on to the next phase of the training. The next phase of the training is a 7-day process. Vermont adds in an extra day. We figure we have you for 9 days. We're going to keep you for the full 2 weeks, and you get an extra 8 hours at the end of that. During that 7-day period, you're tested 6 more times, each time having to meet a certain level of understanding and ability to apply what you're learning. So it's not an easy, guaranteed show up and you're going to pass through the class type of thing. If you are fortunate enough to make it out of the DRE school and pass the final examination, you get the opportunity to go to Phoenix. And forgive me if I seem distracted today. I've spent the last 8 days in Phoenix, where it was about 80 to 85 each day. Come back to the snow in Vermont, and it was kind of disheartening. But anyways, so you get to go to field certification. Field certification to the administrators in here is not a vacation. Yes, they're in Phoenix. They're spending the majority of their time inside of the 4th Avenue jail, evaluating and screening drug-impaired individuals. They get to see very little of downtown Phoenix. Okay. During there, they're required to see certain drug categories, do certain number of evaluations, and we'll talk about those a little more as we go. So part of the preschool learning objectives, defining the word drug. The word drug for the drug evaluation and classification program might be a different definition than what people are used to seeing or using in their day-to-day lives. We learn about 7 categories of drugs. With the DEC program, there are categories of drugs that are broken out that way because of what they do to our body, how they change how our body works and how we behave. With the drug evaluation or influence evaluation that the officers are going to do, there are 12 components to it. And it's a very standardized and systematic program that's utilized all over the United States, in Canada, and other places around the world. One of the key things that they're going to learn to do and expand upon is to be able to administer and interpret the psychophysical test, those standard foundational type tests that we've used in impaired driving curriculums from as far back as I can remember. I think they came in around 1983 or so in their current format. The officers also learn about vital signs. They learn how the body works, how different physiological changes take place, whether it's from natural neurotransmitters in our autonomic nervous system to how drugs mimic those behaviors and actions. So we learn about vital signs. They learn to take vital signs, blood pressures, pulses, body temperatures, all of those types of things. And they learn how vital signs or parts of the autonomic nervous system are changed by the drugs that are housed within those different 7 drug categories. They conduct eye examinations. Eye examinations not unlike what you might get If you went to your doctor because you were having balance issues or they thought you might have some sort of a concussion or something like that. Very thorough neurological exams that partake of the eyes. And they talk about physiological issues of alcohol and also of drugs. And we had Dr. Roberts help us with this last class and share his wisdom to the group, so that was good. So you pass out of DRE preschool, you get to go to the 7-day school. We talk about drugs in our society and what kind of a role are they playing and what are we seeing. We go in depth with the 7 drug categories and why certain drugs are in there and what types of drugs are in there. DRE officers are subjected to have to learn not only the pharmaceutical names, but street names and names that are used in Canada and names that are used in the U.S. pharmaceutical companies. And it's a pretty exhaustive learning process. They go through and learn how to do the drug evaluation, learn all the different steps to make it standardized and systematic. They learn how to document it. There's a ton of information on an average drug influence evaluation. That DRE may be looking at upwards of 100 to 107, I've heard, different variables of information that they're collecting, that they're going to have to interpret what that means and try to make some sort of a good, solid opinion based on what they're seeing for information. So that kind of gets us to that interpreting part. And it's amazing to see the progression in how well they do as they start out. You start out a little tentative, they learn to start applying all that knowledge, and it's amazing what they can do. And I think Greg's a good testament to that from what he saw in Phoenix. And then being able to prepare this narrative report and what it means and help to guide our prosecutors a little bit. This is information that sometimes is very new to them. So the DREs become somewhat educators about this to the prosecutors as well. We go through the different procedures. The DREs are required to prepare and maintain a curriculum vitae, which is talking about their education, spelling out all the different things that they've accomplished to try to rise to that expert level. This is a little bit different than the ranking file officer. And part of the DRE process is a continuing ed component to it. So once you get out of DRE school, you have to pass a 100-question final knowledge exam, or excuse me, final examination. That allows you to move on to field certs. And this is the only class, I'm pretty sure in Vermont, for sure in Vermont, that you have to pass with 80% or more. That's different than the rest of the curriculum at our academy. So very stringent requirements to get through this. So once we get to Phoenix or whatever field certification site you're working with, the DRE candidate has to conduct a minimum of 12 evaluations. So they're going to screen 12 suspected impaired people. They don't know what that person has used. They don't know that they've used anything. But they're going to be presented with an individual and they're going to do an evaluation on them. At the completion of that evaluation, without knowing what the toxicology results were for that person, that DRE has to make an opinion. The opinion is based on whether or not they believe impairment is there, whether or not that impairment is drug-driven or a medical issue, and if it is drug-driven, what category or categories of drugs is driving that impairment. They have to have 9 of those 12 evaluations supported by toxicology samples. They have to be right 7 out of 9 times, and they have to opine on 3 of the 7 drug categories. So it's not an easy, just check the box type of a training. All of their evaluations are supervised by a DRE instructor. It's quite an extensive process. Once they complete and have met the requirements of field certification, they then move on to a multi-part comprehensive examination. The final knowledge examination is a pretty grueling endeavor. There can't be any significant errors or omissions. They are tested on all of the information from DRE school and then some. We conducted the test last Wednesday, March 5th, for our first group that came down from Vermont. This is a written examination. This isn't a true-false, check-the-boxes type examination. The first officer done completed it in just under 7 hours. The last officer done completed it in 9.5 hours. And this is page after page after page of essays that describe, what would happen if you combined alcohol and cannabis, what might happen if you combined heroin and methamphetamines. And they'll talk about all the different variables. And it's a pretty extensive process. Again, this has to be reviewed. DRE instructor signs off on it, and it's signed off not only by one instructor, but by two. In order to pass your progress log into your state coordinator for credentialing, more than one instructor has to approve or verify that you've reached the significant knowledge level to become a DRE. So once you've done that, it's not a lifetime certification. It's only good for 2 years. And during that time, you have to continue your education. You have to stay proficient with what you're doing. And our standards are that you have to have 4 evaluations since your last recertification, continuing education in this area, minimum of 8 hours during your recertification period. You're keeping your curriculum vitae up to speed. You're keeping track of all of your involvement with your rolling log and all of your evaluations. And that gets approved by an instructor. You have to show proficiency. It's not just presenting documents. You actually have to prove to that instructor that you've maintained the right level of proficiency, and only then can you submit that back in to the state coordinator to maintain your certification. So it is a grueling process, but it's certainly a worthy one. We've heard a lot of people talk about how important the DREs are. They are certainly those boots on the ground that help us get to where we need to be and getting these folks off the road. So I guess we're up for questions, if there are any. Come on, you don't want to go to lunch that bad, do we? Maybe? No questions? Okay, thank you.